This is something I was looking forward to talking about and especially getting into with you guys. If you've been under a rock, that maybe you haven't heard about this, or you're not paying attention, or you've completely unplugged like some of us I know are trying very desperately to do. But earlier this week, Spotify and Joe Rogan announced that Spotify has acquired the exclusive rights beginning in 2021 to the Joe Rogan podcast, the Joe Rogan Experience. Now, they have paid reportedly over $100 million for the exclusive rights. This is going to change the music business forever. And I said earlier, yes, I'm very well aware that the Joe Rogan Experience is a podcast. It has nothing to do with the music business, but it is going to change the music business. And I want to walk through a few ways and tell you exactly how this is going to happen. But more importantly, some of the things that you need to be aware of right now to start taking advantage and seeing how this is going to benefit you. I said on a post on Facebook the other day that every songwriter, independent artist, you should be putting up and erecting a shrine to Joe Rogan in your house or in your studio. You should be doing it. Let's walk through some of the numbers, okay? Because I don't know if some of you understand this. I know you know that the Joe Rogan podcast is a big thing. It really is a big thing. But I want to walk through some of the numbers with you. Did you know that, especially as it pertains to Spotify, right now as we sit here today, podcasts, they make up 25% of all listenership on the platform. So about 75% music, 25% podcasts. When you talk about Joe Rogan in particular, the Joe Rogan podcast has about 190 million downloads, plus over 3 billion views on YouTube. Now, from a monetary standpoint, 3 billion views generates about $6 million a year in just YouTube ad revenue, just for views on YouTube, about $6 million a year. Not too shabby. Now, as it relates to Spotify, most people think that Drake is the number one streaming artist on Spotify. He's got 26 billion streams. 26 billion streams. But he's not the biggest. Even before the exclusive deal, the Joe Rogan podcast is just like this podcast. It's available everywhere. It's available on Apple. It's available on Google, iHeartRadio. It's available everywhere. Spotify. Even before the exclusive deal kicks in, Joe Rogan already has 28 billion. So he has more streams of his podcast on Spotify than Drake does. I mean, let that sink in for just a second. Now what Spotify is going to do is own this show outright, meaning that the podcast will no longer be available on Apple. It won't be on YouTube. Matter of fact, Spotify is developing a video platform just for the Joe Rogan Experience, because they will not be, when I say exclusive, it's exclusive. You won't be able to find the Joe Rogan Experience with a podcast on YouTube anymore. You won't find it on Apple Podcast or Google or Amazon. You won't find it anywhere other than Spotify. And for that exclusive right, Spotify is paying over $100 million. Now, you're like, okay, Steve, well, what does that mean and how is it changing the music industry? We have talked about in the past how, in all honesty, major labels and radio are becoming useless. And more so by the day. Now, there are a lot of people that don't agree with that and don't believe that. They're full of shit, and they're just trying to prop up the existing system to keep it going. The fact of the matter is radio's going bankrupt and it's dead. Nobody fucking listens to the radio anymore. Everybody is streaming. And apparently everybody's listening to the Joe Rogan podcast, which is good. I listen to it every week. So I love it. Every time there's a new episode, I'm listening to it. But here's where I think things are going to change. Spotify, for the longest time, even in our business, they have not been a content owner. They are a content distributor, meaning that they get the content from you, either an independent label or an independent artist, or in the case of major labels, they use us and major labels as a way to provide content. They are purely, up to this point, have been a distributor of other people's content. Now, for a long time, we've talked about how horrible Spotify is and the rates on paying songwriters for songwriter royalties. And then you look at this deal and you see, well, they're giving Joe Rogan $100 million. And my first thought was, well, at least they're paying somebody. And it is frustrating. But the reason that is because they do not own the content. The labels own the content. And when it comes to major label content, music, the labels have a much better deal with Spotify and the other streaming outlets than the songwriters do. I mean, in some cases, the record labels are getting 50, 60, 70%, and as songwriters are stuck over here at 0.00000091 cents per spin. So, no, the songwriters are not making money. The record labels are making an absolute shit ton on streaming. They love streaming. But here's where the tide is going to turn. When you start seeing distributors become content owners and exclusive content owners, this is where the game is going to change. Now that Spotify is going from just providing music that is owned by other people for you to stream, and now they are getting into the content ownership and exclusive content ownership business, what's next? I'm telling you what's next is you're not going to have major labels of Warner Brothers, Sony, and Universal anymore. I think in 4 years, you won't even hear those names anymore. I think the major labels are going to become Apple, Amazon, Google, Pandora, Spotify. Why in the world would Spotify continue a relationship with major labels when they can just go sign these artists themselves? I think what you're going to see in the coming weeks, in the coming months, is that you are going to start seeing Spotify and Apple Music and Google/YouTube. They are going to start signing exclusive deals with artists. Why would an artist like Adele sign with Sony again when she could sign directly with Spotify? Spotify is going to give her $100 million for her next 3 albums, or $250 million for her next 3 albums, or Taylor Swift, or Maroon 5, or Blake Shelton, or Jason Aldean, any of these people. Because at that point, the functionality of the label is over. Nobody's listening to the radio. Everybody is listening to Spotify and Apple Music, Deezer, other digital streaming music platforms. And if you don't need radio anymore, and you own and control the content, and you own and control who has access to it, when they have access to it, I'm telling you, what you're going to see in the music business is much like what Netflix and Amazon and Disney and HBO are starting to do with movies and television shows. Original content. Netflix produces its own shows. They don't have to go out and license shows because it's more expensive to do that. We've talked about this many, many, many times. The value in the music business or in any business whatsoever is owning the content, not leasing the content. The power is in owning the content. So I think what we're going to see is Apple, Spotify, Google, YouTube, Amazon, Pandora. They are going to start doing one-on-one deals with artists the exact same way that Spotify has done this deal with the Joe Rogan podcast. Now, I don't know that they're all going to be $100 million. I mean, Taylor Swift, there was rumors back when she was considering leaving Big Machine and before she went to Universal that Apple was a player. But I don't think they were quite there yet. Spotify has now fired the first shot. And Apple is going to fire back. Because you got to think about this. By far, the number one downloaded and streamed podcast on Apple Podcast is the Joe Rogan Experience. Okay? Now that's going to be gone. So they're going to need something to fill that space on their platform. Joe Rogan sent so many people to Apple and to Google and to YouTube and other platforms to listen to his podcast that now they're going to go one place. And that's it. When you think of it in music terms, it's the exact same thing. What if artists like Taylor Swift or Adele or Justin Bieber or any of these, Ariana Grande, Selena Gomez, Luke Combs, any of these artists could sign one-on-one deals with these distributors and go around the major label completely? Because what's the purpose of signing a record label with a record label anyway, right? It's a credit card. It's a very high interest credit card. We've talked about that in the past. You want that record label to do the publicity. You want the record label to get it to radio. You want the record label to put the money behind it that it takes to get it out in front of people. Well, if you cut that middleman out and you sign a deal directly with the people that are responsible for getting that music and making it available, why would you sign a label deal? If you're an artist and Spotify comes to you and says, we're going to pay you $50 million for your next 5 records, why do you need a record label? You don't. Spotify is now your record label. They're going to make sure that you get premium placement. They're going to make sure that your music plays in all the top playlists. Is this starting to feel a little familiar? It's the old radio method of years ago. But it's going to be this 21st century modern major label mentality. And it's basically going to render 2 things completely irrelevant. Major labels, there will be no need for them. Also, when you really get down to think about it, this will be the nail in the coffin of radio as we know it. Nobody listens to it as it is right now. Most of the top radio broadcasting companies are going bankrupt. That is a documented fact. Nobody listens to them. What happens when all of these artists start signing direct and exclusive deals with Apple and with Google, with YouTube, with Spotify, with Amazon? And Spotify and Apple, Amazon, Google, YouTube decide we're not letting the music go to radio. See, this is funny because when streaming first started, there was this huge thing with artists. Garth Brooks, for example, held out forever and would not allow his music on the streaming services. Now the streaming services are so big, they're so much bigger than radio or any other platform. Now that's going to be reversed. Now you're going to have all of the streaming distributors forming their own labels and having their own exclusive artists, which will be the top artist in every platform. They will then go, guess what? We're not going to send it to radio. We own the content exclusively. We're not going to give it to radio to play. Because whatever few listeners that are out there that are still listening to radio, if they're listening for these artists, which they are, they'll have to come to Spotify. They'll have to come to Apple Music. They'll have to come to Google, or they'll have to come to Pandora or Amazon. This is the future. Record labels are done. And you have Joe Rogan to thank for that. And I think it's a good thing. I think over the next 6 months to a year, you're going to start seeing more of this. As a lot of these artists come out of their deals, you're going to see more artists start to sign exclusive deals with the streaming distributors. I would say that I would probably look for big news from Apple first. Like I said, Spotify fired the first shot with Joe Rogan. This is going to cost these platforms a lot of money. A lot of money. When you've got the Joe Rogan podcast on YouTube, the video version of his podcast, generating 3 billion views, if it's making him $6 million a year, how much ad revenue do you think that's making Google that they will lose January 1st, 2021? A lot. Same thing with Apple. Same thing with Amazon. They are taking something major away from every other platform. It is coming in the form of music as well. You're going to start seeing artists, and I think rightly so. I think record labels, the only reason you need a record label is if you can't afford to do anything. You've got the talent, but you don't have the backing. then you need a record label. Or if you want to be famous, God knows we fucking talked about that. All you people that want to be famous, you deserve to be on a record label that's like the Titanic that's about to hit the fucking iceberg. And believe it or not, the major labels know. They have seen the iceberg for a very long time. They know it's there. Well, last week, they hit it. Because of Joe Rogan, that iceberg is out there. And that iceberg has a name. And it's Spotify/Joe Rogan. Because now this is going to usher in a completely new modern music business. And I, for one, I think it's great. Why? Because if you are an independent artist, I've been preaching and saying for years and years and years, do for yourself. If it is to be, it's up to me. This somewhat levels the playing field because if you are doing what you should be doing, as an artist to promote yourself, to promote your music, this is going to put the power of social media square on your shoulders and the responsibility is going to be yours. There is nothing that says that you can't make your music popular on Spotify, that you can't grow your fans and grow your streams on Apple Music and other platforms, that you can't grow your YouTube channel. There are ways to do it. Now, what most of you spend most of your time trying to do is trying to figure it out how to do it without any fucking money. And you spin your wheels and you go round and round and you talk bad about everybody that does have money and you down people like me that say, look, you've got to have a budget. Meanwhile, all of you are looking for a record label and you want to be signed to a record label because of that very fact, because you don't have the money to do it or you're not willing to do what it takes to get the money to do it. Now, that's some real talk, but I have never met more lazy sons of bitches in my life than in the music business. 90% have the call me when I'm famous mentality. They want somebody else to do it for them. Call me, you know what? I'm not interested in going and playing bars and local clubs and playing covers. If I've heard one fucking time, I've heard it 10 million times. I don't want to play covers. I feel like I'm past that. Well, you're nowhere. So you're obviously not past that. So stop. If you're one of those people, you've got to stop right there and realize that whole goal, that whole dream that you've been trying to attach yourself to, that you've been trying to achieve, it is a sinking ship. It's, again, most of you out there are trying to get a ticket on the Titanic. You know that it's going down. You see that it's going down, but you still want on it just so you can say that you were on it. You guys, for whatever reason, take so much pride and value in being able to say, well, I'm with Warner Brothers or I'm with CAA or William Morris. Meanwhile, they hadn't done a fucking thing for you ever other than add you as added value that you don't ever get paid anything for. But you think somehow it's worth it having that little designation on your website or you're able to put that on your Instagram profile and somehow people all of a sudden think they've heard of you before because you're with William Morris or CAA or Sony or somebody else. You're all trying to get a ticket on the Titanic. I hope that you're listening to what we're talking about today because this is important. It also shows you the direction things are moving and the direction things that are going. And if you've kind of had this in the back of your mind and you've thought about this in the past, but you've been slow to adapt, this should make it very clear to you. This is what's going to happen. You should right now stop the mentality and thinking, I want to get a record label deal. I want to get a publishing deal. Maybe if you do think that, stop thinking in terms of Nashville. Stop thinking in terms of Los Angeles. Stop thinking in terms of Capitol, Warner Brothers, Universal, Sony, Big Machine. Start thinking, I want a record deal with Spotify. I want a record deal with YouTube. I want a record deal with Apple Music. The people that start thinking that way right now and start aggressively pursuing that are going to be the people that win. And those people will leave all these other shit talkers and bullshit artists here in Nashville and Los Angeles that are chasing this dream that is unattainable to 99.9999999% of you listening. and throughout the rest of the world. You're going to be the ones that win. Start seeing the signs. Start focusing more on your streams on Spotify, on Apple Music. I still see people posting links to buy their single on iTunes. Why the hell would you do that? That shows me how clueless you really fucking are. You have no clue. People aren't buying music. Why? Because they can spend $9 a month and get any song that was ever recorded. Why would they spend $1.99? Why would they spend? Here's a good way to look at it. Why would they spend 10% of their overall monthly music budget on you? You may think you're that special. You're not. That's why most of you do all of this stuff and you put all this stuff out on social media and you release a song. And if truth be told, you sell 100 copies, 150, because it's mom, dad, grandma, aunts and uncles, close friends trying to show you a little bit of support. When you could use that same energy, post your Spotify link, post your Apple Music link. Stop asking people to pay for something that they don't value. They have told you and let you know time and time and time again that they do not value music enough to pay for it. Yet you keep asking them to do so. What you need to do is to figure out how to make money with your music at $0. How do I turn streams into sales? We've got courses on that at the Academy. I've got hours and hours and hours of videos on YouTube and even in this podcast walking you through different ways to do just that. It's so much easier to get somebody to buy into something when you deliver it in a way, in a format in which you know they already love. Why do you think cover songs do so well on Spotify? They always get good covers anyway. They always get featured in the right playlist that brings some attention to that artist. Why do you think that is? Because those artists have figured it out. You've got YouTube artists, Teddy Swims, Boyce Avenue. I'm going to name two, but there's thousands of them out there that are having the kind of success in their career that you want to have in yours, except you're being stubborn about it and thinking you're going to go this way because you're more talented than everybody else, that your songs are better. Well, they're not. It's always you. If you want to get somebody to eat a literal piece of dog shit, you know how to do it? Cover it in chocolate, because everybody loves chocolate. That's why these people do so well on YouTube, and these cover videos do well, and these cover songs do well, because you're taking the entire guesswork out of it. Who knows if somebody's going to like you as an artist? Who knows if somebody's going to like your lifestyle or like how you talk or like how you sing or like how you present yourself? Nobody knows. But when you give them something that you know that they love, that it's almost universal. I'm going to give you my spin on this Journey song. Well, everybody loves Faithfully. You take the entire guesswork out of it. They already know they like the song. And if you do a great version of that song, then that might make them like you too. See, that is so simple to me. It's so simple. Why more artists aren't following that? You want to know what's as big as Luke Combs is. And everyone can agree that 2019, 2020, have been Luke Combs' years, okay? They just have been, and well-deserved. But do you want to know what's been the most popular thing that Luke Combs has done in the last 6 months? It's been a cover song. It blew up the internet. What was it, Fast Cars? That blew up the internet because he's giving people something that he knows they already love. And he's an established, successful artist. If he understands that and knows that and wants to keep engaging his fan base and introducing himself to other fans, I can promise you there are a lot more people that are Luke Combs fans today that would have never been a Luke Combs fan that don't listen to country radio, because that version, that cover of him doing Fast Cars, has been shared on Facebook and YouTube so many times it's got millions and millions and millions of views. And that introduced him to an audience that he otherwise would not have. So if a successful artist that is at the top of the game realizes that, why don't you? And why aren't you? Why are you so focused on people loving your songs, thinking that you're the shit? You got to let your ego go. Because in this new modern music business that's coming, nobody gives a shit about you. Nobody gives a damn about your song. Nobody certainly cares about your ego. It is about content, exclusive content ownership, and giving people and providing products and music that people love. Because Spotify or Apple Music or YouTube, they don't care. They want eyeballs. And they know that you doing a cover of this or you doing a cover of that is going to get far more attention and far more eyeballs than your new single that you wrote with Joe Blow last week. Because they know nobody gives a shit. If you want to win the game, play by the rules. The rules are out there. The rules are not going to change for you. I can promise you that. There are a lot of you out there that think that you're going to change this business. I don't know, unless you just were raised in a bubble and people told you how awesome you were all the time. And you know, that happens a lot. You see a lot of those on American Idol and that's why I don't watch those shows. But you're not. You're not going to be the one. It's about finding and achieving the success that you say that you want to do. And it shouldn't matter how you have to do that. If you have to achieve that success level that you want to achieve, if you want to do that, it shouldn't matter the road that you travel to get there. What does it really matter if it's your song or if it's a cover of a Bon Jovi song? What difference does it matter? If the ultimate, if your idea and the overall achievement of success is in the lifestyle you live, being able to do what you love for a living, if that's your definition, then stop trying to force feed people stuff that they don't want, which is your fucking music. I'm sorry to have to put it to you that way. Originality is everything. I completely agree. But why don't you be original with something you know people already love? Take the guesswork out of it. You don't have to wonder whether or not they're going to like it. Because the only people that are ever going to be really, truly 100% authentic and honest with you are the people outside of your family. And your family and your friends are going to tell you how great it is. And that gives you a false sense and a false perception of the opinion of the greater people out there in the world that are consuming music. When really, if everybody was being honest with you, they'd be like, nah, it's average. I really don't care for it. Put your ducks in a row. See where this is going. The roadmap is very clear. Spotify has started this with signing the Joe Rogan podcast to an exclusive deal worth $100 million. In the coming weeks, in the coming months, mark my words, you're going to see established artists stepping away from the major label system and signing similar deals directly with Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, and the major labels are going to be dead. So if that is your goal, if that's what you're working towards and you're trying to get a label deal, you are trying to buy a ticket on the Titanic. Now that you can see that it's coming and that it's actually happening, now would be the time to adjust your strategy. Now's the time to right your ship and get headed and moving in the right direction. And we will talk on upcoming podcasts about different ways to do that. I think one of the things, like I said earlier, please stop sharing links for people to buy your music because nobody's going to buy it. Well, let's put it this way. Not enough people are going to buy it to make a difference. Enough people might buy it that you could take 2 or 3 of your friends to Starbucks. And that's it. Start focusing on the kinds of content that will get you noticed. And that may be different for everybody, but I would encourage you, very highly encourage you, to choose the path of least resistance. So many of you out there get up every day and choose to fight this unwinnable war. Stop fighting that war. Choose the path of least resistance. Know the rules of the game. Play by the rules of the game. And I know that the results of what you're currently having versus what you will have are completely different. Joe Rogan just changed the music industry forever. If you don't see it that way, you need to go find something else to do with your life. Because I can see it just as clear as day. And I think a lot of you out there can see it as well. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Steve Freeman Podcast. Don't forget to check out this episode, our sponsors, Performance Inspired Nutrition, pi-nutrition.com, and Artist Development Academy.com. Guys, until the next time, keep being creative, keep pressing the boundaries, and there's nothing wrong with being independent. See you in the next one.
Thanks for joining us for the Steve Freeman Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and follow Steve on social media at the Steve Freeman.